Welcome to the December 14, 2023 meeting of the Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. If we could have a call to order and roll call, please.
Yes. Member Danley?
Here.
Member Fisher? Here. Member Miller?
Here.
Member Russell?
Here.
Member Sorensen?
Here.
And Member Toll will be absent, and Chair Peters.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2 is our non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. We allocate 15 minutes during this portion of the meeting to allow individuals who would like an opportunity to address the board on any matter that's not listed on the agenda. We allocate 3 minutes to each individual for their comments. Any individual present that would like to address, please stand and identify yourself for the record, please.
Okay, Mickey Collins, 217 East Scranton in Lake Bluff. I want to address something that is not included in any of your materials that you are going to discuss tonight. I just want to throw it on the table. I hope you'll discuss it. You may reject it, and that would be fine, but I think it needs to be discussed. So, Clara, are you able to bring up my little slide presentation?
I believe so. It's saying
the-
that one isn't. Let me try the other one.
It's the
that's on
only
there.
thing on that drive, I believe.
Okay.
And I can start. It's very short. I just think it's kind of nicer to have pictures because it illustrates things a little better. But, yeah, so you're going to be discussing lots of things for the comprehensive plan, and I want to bring up a few things that should be discussed. They've dropped off discussion points about L1, and I just want to kind of make sure they're on the table. So, can you go, yeah. So, as you know, this is kind of a once-in-a-generation, opportunity. 30-year-old, almost, comp plan. It's time to really think about a new vision, too, if we can, at this time. So, would you mind, are you able to do a full screen?
This isn't, it's not a PowerPoint, it's
It's a PDF.
Adobe, yeah, so I can't do, this is full screen for me.
Oh, okay, fine.
Sorry.
Okay, so we have, we do, and for some reason, it's not in color. I don't understand that, but anyway. So Lake Bluff has a couple challenges. One that's talked about a lot, one that's not talked about quite so much. The housing issue of being almost 100% single-family homes with very little offered for small households, empty nesters, young professionals is kind of acknowledged. Less talked about is the fact that our property taxes are very high. So I think we all probably know people that either left Lake Bluff or decided not to move here because of the level of the property taxes. So I think that should be kept in mind as we're thinking about the future of our village and just are there ways in which we could kind of get a little more income into the village. Next. So here's L1's in orange. So you can see, I think the aerial is very informative because you can see at the top, that's that existing pretty high-quality retail with Heinen's, Target, and a bank, and quite a few other little smaller businesses. And then this big area to the south, what's very interesting about it is that if you look at the perimeter, you can look at the west and south, that's Lake Forest. Everything there is quite well shielded, so that whatever happens there doesn't have a huge impact. And then on the east, it's 41. So there are no Lake Bluff residential areas that touch this, that really even come close. Next one. So I know in the RFP that Michael responded to, it identified it as a flex industrial area. And the TSCA survey did ask about, I don't know what your response was on that, but about a business park that would support manufacturing and the trades. But, so my question is that should shouldn't we look at this and see if that is the highest and best use for this area, for Lake Bluff? Okay. Other communities, such as Highland Park, are very actively opposing any increased truck traffic from warehouse development. Right now, the way that area is zoned, the base zoning is to allow warehouse development. But I'm not sure that that is the best growth direction for our village. Yes. Because if you look south, we have Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital doubling in size. The construction has started, $389 million to be completed in 2028. And if the next slide kind of shows the relationship of those two areas, you can see the hospital down there with the one lower arrow. And then there's that orange dot is Pasquazy. From there to the entrance to the hospital is 1.4 miles. Quick car drive, you can even walk it. Next one. So why should we be thinking about that hospital? Well, hospitals generally support a lot of businesses, and areas around hospitals boom, actually. And this area, L1, is kind of the only opportunity for some of these things to grow as a result of that hospital's growth. So medical offices, restaurants, housing, and hotels, they're all supported by hospitals. Next one. But why a hotel, right? Well, if somebody's in the hospital, their family may need a place to stay. Interestingly, high-risk patients are often moved into hotels to get them out of that, the chance. If I had a cousin who had a liver transplant at Northwestern in Chicago, was moved into a residence inn, and then went back to the hospital just for daily checkups. But they want to get them away from the possibility of infection in the hospital. The third point, I think, is the really big one. You can charge a 14% hospitality tax. That's rather typical. And that would go directly into Lake Bluff coffers. Nobody else has to take any of that. So, next one. So I've heard concerns expressed, and I think these are all worthy of discussion. One is that if you added residential there, you'd end up with sort of a trucks versus tricycles kind of conflict. That office buildings are a dead market, that the buildings out there in L1 are just too valuable to be demolished, and that you'd lose high-paying jobs there in that area. Next. So I don't know. I've spent a lot of time looking there. The truck traffic is actually quite minimal. I don't know if we really want more. We do have a lot of truck traffic in our residential areas between landscapers and movers and construction. The medical office building market is strong, and buildings are often demolished for a higher use. I don't know the job data for Lake Bluff residents, if there are any that have jobs there. I know there are only 151 people that both live and work in Lake Bluff, and the ones that I know are working out of their homes. There are quite a few of those people. So it'd be interesting to see if there's, I don't know what jobs would affect Lake Bluffers. Next. There's just an image that, we all know that buildings come down and make way for something different. Next. So what could L1 be? Next. Well, a walkable mixed-use area. I think Elliot and Gary remember when this was discussed way back when we were talking about the comprehensive plan years ago. These are just samples, but this is the hot development market right now. Mixing residential offices, retail and restaurants. And I think maybe the image on the lower right has a little more green space. I think out in L1 you wouldn't want it to look terribly urban like maybe the one on the upper left. But there are different ways that this could be designed, and you really want somebody to do some visioning for that area. Next. So it could be very much aimed toward residential because of that walking distance that you'd have to those stores and the bank and the restaurants. This is just an image of a mostly residential area. Next one. When these projects were proposed for Block 3, in the back of my mind, I kept saying, oh my gosh, we could build so many of them out there in L1. You could make neighborhoods of the scale of building. And that would really have an impact. It would really provide housing for retirees and others, rather than just a one-off of this type of building. Next. So what would we have to do next? I think step number one, it's where you are at with, the comprehensive plan, and just getting some possibilities into the comprehensive plan for that area. Next, then we do need to develop a streetscape out there. We don't have sidewalks, we don't have street trees a few maybe. But we would need to plan out, is there on-street parking, are there bike lanes? There are two different right-of-way dimensions. So that's really not a zoning board thing. I think that would be a village thing. Next. And then just some simple zoning changes, which would allow those other uses, allow three-story buildings, maybe a little higher as a special use for a hotel, require the buildings to come toward the street with street-facing entrances, and then require parking to be behind or below the buildings, which interestingly is already in our code for that area. Next. So I think the thing to realize is this wouldn't be an instant dramatic change. It's just eliminating the barriers to have this happen there. It would be incremental. Some buildings would be replaced, others wouldn't be. I think the one-story buildings are the better candidates. There's no need for the village to spend money at this point in time. Did you have a question, Gary?
No.
Oh, okay. I think just one last, there's some benefits, right? The bigger tax base, because you have higher level buildings there, you get that hospitality tax. If you got a hotel, the missing middle housing opportunity, the fact that it's not really going to impact any of our beloved neighborhoods, reduce truck traffic, and just a long-term vision. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Collins. I'm not sure this is the right time to open it up for further discussion, but I think we'll have Clara and the team incorporate this into the record, so to speak, and maybe provide us with copies of the, presentation, because we can certainly more fully explore this going forward. Unless anybody on the committee has any questions or comments at this time? But very comprehensive and certainly insightful.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank
yeah.
you for your attention.
Oh,
Appreciate
no,
it.
thank you for bringing it forward.
That was very good.
Yeah, thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, maybe Clara, at some point, just, circulate the deck
Yep,
to us. That'd be great.
absolutely.
All right. Agenda item number 3, consideration of the November 15, 2023 special meeting minutes.
Yes, I know. There was a
Any
name
proposed
typo.
changes or other recommendations? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Minor change, yeah. for
All in
name.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 4, comprehensive land use plan goals and objectives presentation. Ms. Gable, if you want to give us a brief overview?
Yeah, we have Michael Blue and Andrew Dunham here from Tesca and Associates, and they'll be providing a presentation and then also coordinating a discussion about the goals of the comprehensive land use plan that they've taken from basically a lot of the other goals that we've had in other documents, planning documents, and the strategic plan as well. And basically, they've provided those and are looking for feedback on if there are any that are no longer kind of in line with how you see the future of development in the village, or if there's others that you think are still very accurate and things that we should be working towards. So, Michael, if you'd like to come up, I can get your PowerPoint.
Oh, well, great to see you again.
Just to add to what Clara described, I'd rather call this a workshop than a presentation, because that's really what we want to do, is hear from you more than hear from us, quite honestly. But we want to summarize and set a little bit of context before we dive in. So in terms of the overall scheme of the plan, you'll recall that there's the data collection, there's public engagement, and then there's visioning at a higher level than you just saw. But what a great introduction to what we're going to do tonight. There's the visioning step, and the idea with the visioning step, with tonight's workshop, is to confirm the direction that the plan is generally looking to go. As we developed goals and objectives, we put together a very detailed list, and then in working with staff, with Clara and Drew in particular, talked about, you know what, let's start at a higher level. Let's confirm that the direction that we've been going in and the directions that we have before us that are opportunities are appropriate. And a lot of that is built from the previous plans that the village has done, because as we've said, as I've said standing here before, those fundamentals don't necessarily change. They maybe get refined, but they don't go away. We don't decide, nope, we're not going to be a primarily historic single-family community anymore. That's not going to change, right? But within that, there are just some directions at a high level to confirm that we're moving in the right direction. And then from that, as follow-up to tonight, we'll go through and we will create some more focused goals and objectives that we're going to be focused around the geographies within the community, which are what previous plans have done, and then get that back to you for you to confirm. So you've seen the information, and you've got the little worksheets in front of you. This is what we're going to try and do, and probably 3.5, 4 hours we thought we could spend tonight doing. No.
I got an appointment that.
Oh, do you? All right. No, it's about a 90-minute worth of workshop, but we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and insights on this. So in general, goals and objectives are those big picture directions that you set. Goals in particular, and the fundamental goals are really what's essential tonight. We'll talk about those in a little bit. But the goals are identifying things that should be preserved, right? Again, we're not throwing out babies in bathwaters, especially in a historic developed community like Bluff. There are a lot of things to be preserved, and that's part of what goals and objectives help us identify. They also help us identify the conditions that aren't here now, but we'd like to accomplish. In a lot of cases, those deal with specific properties, and the presentation you saw is just kind of an example of maybe doing that. And then they define kind of the intentionality of the plan. They say, this is definitely what we want to do. And as we talk about the plan, as we talked about it before, the idea is to have those challenging conversations now before you're presented with another development and there's a lot of concerned neighbors here. So that's the purpose of the goals. So if we keep going, again, just to define what they are, goals are broad aspirational statements. You may or may not be able to achieve them. The objectives are the action statements to get there. Like I said, that's what we're going to do next. What we're going to do tonight is talk about these fundamental planning goals, and those are the 20 statements that you have in front of you tonight. These are high-level, village-wide goals that will inform the future, objectives and geography-specific goals and objectives. I generally don't read from the screen, but that's a real important point. And that's really the intent of tonight's discussion. What influenced these high-level goals, these fundamentals that you have in front of you, are the previous plans that have been conducted by the village, one, and two, refined a little bit by what we heard. And we talked about this when we went through and did the existing conditions presentation a little while ago. You saw some of this, but these lists of preserve, enhance, add, and remove. And again, these are not meant to be surprising. These are meant to be kind of the highest level of direction that's set. And so Without reading them all, I would tell you that preserving was about the historic character of the community and the open space and the tree canopy. Those are fundamentals that we heard as we talked to the community. A lot of this comes from the feedback from the website. If you go to the website, you can see all those little dots that people put on the maps, and you can go and read those. That's a lot of fun. What needs to be enhanced was trails. We heard a lot about trails, and not unique to Lake Bluff. A lot of communities are talking about trails now. Part of trails is completing sidewalks, right, and making it easier to get around. Housing was something that the village specifically made an important part of this comprehensive planning effort by having the simultaneous work that's being done with the good folks at Opticos and who we're keeping in touch with as we go through this. But what do you remove? Well, you remove things that are kind of impediments to these other goals and objectives, right? A lot of pavement, overhead lines, things like that are just what goes out when those things go in. When we take the next step based on what we hear from you tonight, we're going to start to focus on these as geographies, and we can talk about those a little bit more once we get to that stage. But again, there are different parts of the village, and it's not meant to create an east-west idea. What it's meant to do is identify the reality that when things happen, they happen in the context of their local geography. So that's why we're going to focus goals and objectives that way. And that, as we said, will be the next step. So what we'd like to do for tonight's exercise is working with staff. As I said, we developed these 20 high-level statements and as fundamental goals of the plan. And what we wanted to hear from each of you was whether or not these are spot on, whether or not they need to be refined a little bit, and also what's missing. And so if you, let's see, what else did I miss? I know what I'm going to ask. Andrew, did I miss anything from that? All right, I'm doing good. So before you, you've got these 3 two-sided worksheets. This is what's going to be the focus of our efforts tonight. And we'll put the themes on the screen. But what we'd like you to do, hopefully everybody's got a pen. If not, we've got a couple we can share. But pull up the one that says community character. And the folks here visiting with us have the sheets too, so we're asking them to participate as well. If you pull up the theme that says community character, what you'll see, Claire, can we go to the next slide that talks about that shows all these different statements? Keep going, I'm explaining this as we go. There you go. So what you've got in front of you is those community character statements. And we tried to put together a structure for how we can talk about them. And so working on your own for a few minutes, we'd ask that you read each of these statements and then think to yourself, is this right? Is this the right approach? And if not, what needs to be tweaked about it? What's wrong with it? And then for each of these, think in terms of whether or not it's truthful and complete, which is kind of another way of saying, is this the right answer? Or does it need to be refined? And then if you can think of an example that jumps out at you of, oh yeah, we could do this by, fill in the answer here. And then we'll walk through that, and we'll do that for each of these 6. And Andrew will take notes, and I'll take notes, and we'll get back to you with what the findings are. But does that sound like an approach that we can work with tonight?
Michael, are these, on these 3 sheets that we just received, is this a resort of the 20 or so goals?
Yes.
Okay, but it's the same material, just with questions?
It's sorted into categories so that we can talk about them thematically. And what you'll find too is that there's going to be repeats. So to save you going, Michael, we already did this one. There are repeats because some of them are in both categories.
Okay, but all the goals that were in our packet, they're all in here, okay.
At least once.
At least once. Okay. Thanks.
So what we're trying to do is create this structure for discussing the future of the village. No pressure. So if you want to take 5 minutes, if you've got any questions, raise a hand and we can talk about it. But yeah, we'll give you a couple minutes to get started.
Can I just ask one general question?
Yeah.
Since some of this probably comes from the comments, on the website, right? You said, do you have any way of tracking whether those are from a large cross-section of the village, or whether those are, I know when we've had things being proposed in the village, we have a lot of discussion and passion and things like that, and sometimes they're from a broad cross-section, and sometimes they're from a very limited group, multiplied. Do you have any way?
Andrew's been managing all this. I'm going to let him
Wonderful.
respond.
Great.
Yeah, so the website right about now is close to about 200 comments. Of those, there are about 78 unique users. Those are just the comments. I think we're close to like I think it might be 600. That might be an overstatement. At least 400 unique people have visited the comment map. So even if they didn't comment, they can thumbs up, thumbs down something. So I think that's a pretty okay cross section for the village. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I would tell you in terms of what Andrew just said, it's a good response from what we see in other
Curious.
plans and processes and stuff. Is it a broad cross section? Is it 600 comments? Is that a broad cross section? I don't think so. But it's the people who are involved enough to participate. And so that's why I always say, when we look at this engagement, we don't ever take it as the right answer. We don't ever base, we're going to do this based on what 4 people. The other thing that's part of this is the open house that we had a few weeks ago, which was fun with the people putting the dots and stuff, so that gets added to it. So that was a long answer to tell you. It's a lot of involvement, relatively speaking, for the size of the community, and it's good engagement. Is it a broad cross-section geographically and whatnot? I don't know that we can tell you that.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, a quick question for you. When I look at the handout on theme community character, our guidance document is a little different than your 4 on the left side.
Oh, yeah, we resorted a little, I apologize, but let's focus on what you've got. Should we thought it was the same, but
Yeah, it looks quite a bit different.
Economic development looks the same.
Yeah, just
But-
this first community character, it looks like 2 are similar to housing. Actually, 3, no, sorry, just the 2 are similar to housing. And then,
well, let me tell you that the latest and greatest version of this is the one that's before you. So let's ask you to work for this.
Okay,
And we'll follow that as we go through, and if, we'll do our best to catch up and confirm. But let's work from the handouts.
okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
picking that up. Appreciate it. I don't know why this one's different.
yeah, there are some questions in that community character one that are not in this handout, from what I can tell. The 2, 1 and 3, it looked like are, I'll have to double check if 3 and 4 are.
This isn't character, that's why. It's facilities. Can you advance the facilities one? We figured out what happened.
Yeah,
We cut and paste wrong. So if you go to community facilities, that's where we're starting.
easy to do.
I had a professor many years ago, when we first started using computers, he said, computers don't just help you make mistakes, they help you make them more efficiently. So I apologize for that, and we'll work around it. So, yeah, if you turn through the couple of pages, you'll find the one on community facilities, which is what this is. So we'll start with that, whatever it says at the top of your sheet. Apologies for the confusion.
Oh, no, not a problem.
I'm sorry, I was concentrating on my work while you guys were talking. Did you say jump over to the community
along.
facilities sheet first?
I think if you do, you'll find they're exactly the same, because we cut and paste badly.
Okay, because I think you're going to start talking and discussing these before we get to the end of the 6 sheets. I want to
Oh, I see.
move.
Well, what
through
we're
in
going
the
to do
same
is, we're not
order.
going to do all 6 sheets, we're going to talk after each theme.
Okay,
So
so you
just-
do want community facilities
The
first.
ones you
Just do
did,
community
though, are
facilities. Whether it says community facilities at the top, or it says community character, doesn't matter, just do that one sheet, and then we'll
Okay,
talk.
okay. See, I wasn't listening to your discussion, I was working.
When we have the slide up there, I was just thinking on the, whatever one they didn't fill out, we can just cross off the questions and write 1, 2, 3, and 4 based on what's there, something along those lines, maybe. Oh.
So again, we're working through the one on community facilities and asking you to fill out the handout part of that. I understand the one that says community character also says facilities, but either way, focus on these 4 statements, and we'll just take another minute or two, and then we'll talk through it. The other thing I would ask you is to keep in mind these questions here, because that's what we'll talk about. I'm sort of peeking as a way to see how everybody's doing, but is this going okay? Do you need a couple more minutes? Do you need 3 more minutes, 2 more minutes? You done, you're ready to talk? It'll take us a couple of turns to go through and get the timing right.
I think we're good, Michael.
We're good?
We're all cheating, we're jumping ahead.
Yeah. You're bad students.
Appreciate your collective and individual zeal. Okay, so let's talk about community facilities. Not always the most exciting part of a comprehensive plan, but really an important one because it relates to how residents relate to their community and has land use implications. So this first one on here about the relationship that institutional sites, right? So we're talking about the village hall, we're talking about the fire station, even though it's not ours, about how they connect to people. So first one, is this one right? Should we have this? Is this a good fundamental goal?
It's a good goal, but I wondered why you would single out just institutional. I mean, aren't we concerned about the business area being integrated well with the adjacent neighborhoods? And, because I don't see, it's hard to track all of a sudden, but I don't see that same question for
So,
the
but
retail areas.
that kind of gets to the whole.
Or the downtown area, anyway.
Right, gets to the broad and complete question, but what I hear you saying is,
Might be in there.
this could certainly be broadened to other things as well. Okay, good. Other thoughts about this one? I mean, obviously, yes, they should do this, but George brings up a good point, that this should also not just apply to institutions, but it should have a comparable goal for, I'm sorry, George, I think I cut you off, but the commercial areas or the industrial areas or?
Yeah, I just thought the general goal is a very worthy goal. I just didn't understand why it was only written for institutions.
Good catch, good point, thank you. Somebody else on this first one? That kind of gets to the point of, is anything missing from it? And yeah, so we decided there is. Everybody good with that addition?
Yes.
So it sounds like non-residential is that the focus, you would say, George? Non-residential sites kind of relating to their surroundings, or do you want to keep neighborhoods?
Oh, no, I think the comment drives it integrating with neighborhoods, so I'm thinking any non-neighborhood uses should integrate.
Relates to schools and
With-
churches
right.
and,
Just broader than just the term institutional, is my thought.
Good point.
okay.
And I just might add, I'm not sure where we are with parking these days. You know, a lot of people working from home, and it seems that some of the pressure has eased, but but not really. We need to maintain flexibility with that. Whether we require different things or don't, we need flexibility for the future.
Yeah, this is both a good and a challenging time to do plans because we don't know what the future is going to be. But given
Just
that we
today, we
already,
don't know, or?
nobody knows. But not only did we always have too much parking, now we have way too much parking, right? So, and the conventional wisdom, you know, in planning and development circles is that we're not going back to where we were in terms of office, in terms of retail, and that's certainly got a parking aspect to it. So I like the idea of emphasizing the parking aspect of this a little bit. Everybody else good with that? Is that a good addition? Okay. Any other comments on this one or move forward? Great, moving on. The next one about fortifying public asset systems, attention to improving stormwater facilities, continued access protection of Lake Michigan water source. So this one's about really infrastructure, but primarily about water, water coming and going. Again, these are fundamental goals, and as Drew said, well, you know, we're not going to prioritize them, they're fundamental, we're going to keep them, right? But is there anything that, that maybe is right or wrong, or needs to expand it, or more focused on this one?
Well, maybe just adding, you know, that obviously to do that, we need to coordinate with Lake County government and Lake County stormwater management.
And I actually thought we shouldn't be just focusing on stormwater. I mean, a lot of people suffer from stormwater, but a lot of people that maybe that have their basements flood don't know it, but it's actually because of a poor sanitary system, so, but I have extra insight into that issue. So I
you
think
did-
it should say
are there-
stormwater and sanitary, not just stormwater.
Yeah.
And that the end of the statement, I didn't like the protection to the Lake Michigan water source. I thought it should just say protection of Lake Michigan, because we don't only use it for a water source, we use it to swim in. The overall aesthetic of the lake, I just think it should say protection of Lake Michigan, because then that covers
All right, that's
all the
cool. Everybody
uses,
good?
all the uses of Lake Michigan.
I concur.
Everybody good with that? Good one, thank you.
And I see this also relating to question number 4, so we'll get there too. But it's the nature of our village is that we all have to work together as different boards, and as well as beyond with the county and whatever else is required.
Okay, great. Anything else on this one? Skip to the next. Again, I don't know that you can argue with number 3, but interested to hear if there are additions or ideas to focus it or refine it a little bit, which is what we've been doing with the other ones, and is just what we want to hear.
Just, are there opportunities for shared services with
good.
adjoining communities, or?
Actually, are you intending to take our note sheets? That was,
Oh, you know what? I should have said that. Yes. We'd love to have your notes. Don't worry about your handwriting. You don't have to put your names on them. But yeah, I forgot to mention that. Thank you, George.
Okay, so-
we would love to collect your notes after.
no record of this meeting, no.
Would you rather or anonymous?
No, I'm realizing I'm making notes to myself for the next step, and then I'm not gonna have the notes to myself. Andrew is.
Yeah, thank you. I meant to say that up front.
Sorry, I'm thinking out loud.
No, that's what we're all doing, actually, so it works great. Yeah, if you want to share the notes, we'd love to have them, but that's up to you. So any thoughts, maybe next level on quality of public services, or if there's a bit to focus on? I think the idea of shared service is great, that what I like to call does everybody need a backhoe question? Or can it be shared? But the idea of sharing services is gaining a lot of traction these days. Anything else about that? Cool. So let's move on to 4, which is a mouthful, and touches on a lot of things. But I circled the parks and open space part of it, and then the beach front part of it. So any thoughts on this one about what's too much, what's too little, what you would add?
I think I'd add a specific reference to preserving the golf course. I think that is just such a critical asset to this community, and it should not be ignored.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
And I would add, expand upon this to include ravines, even the areas surrounding our walking spaces. That's sort of the very human scale where we use them daily, and we admire those assets that not too many communities in Chicago have. We've got alleys and right-of-ways where people go out and walk. Bridges over ravines, that little Lillian Dells is amazing, at our open lands, our parkways, all of that contributes to the sense of our green space, and that's really important.
100% agree. Great comment.
I also think maybe it should say open space with the village and collaborating with the park district. I feel like assisting is more that word dictating versus, I feel like the park district and the village should collaborate a little bit better, or we could be better at that collaboration.
Good, well said, I like that, thank you. Anybody else good with that?
Sure.
You can disagree with each other, just want to make sure everybody knows. But that was a great ad, thank you.
No, we're all of one mind here.
Or we're saving our silver bullets.
Yes, you only get 3 disagreements. Anything else on community facilities?
Nope.
That was great. Y'all did that really, really well and really, really efficiently. Let's move on to transportation since,
So I just
yeah, I'm
have
sorry.
I always feel for the people that travel to the meeting that are in the audience, and I felt like the way this was publicized, they were maybe going to get a chance to comment. I know typically we don't want the attendees spending most of the time when the board should be discussing, but at the same time,
I have no problem with it. It's entirely up to the commission and the chair.
I don't know what people, obviously, we don't have an overwhelming number of people in the audience, so, and as long as the few that are here promise not to, since they took the time to be here, if they have strong opinions about something,
We're glad to collect their sheets when they're done, but if,
whatever.
participation's entirely up to the board.
Yeah, I think it would be probably more appropriate if we let anybody address any questions or concerns or recommendations now as we're working on page 1 and then page 2.
So guests, sorry we didn't do this before, but anything about community facilities in these statements or what you heard from the commission that you would add or amend?
I think they did a great job.
I think they did too.
So I agree.
I'm glad we.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the only thing I guess I would add in on number 4 is just a reminder, because a lot of people don't seem to know it, that the Park District is separate from the village, and certain assets are owned by the Park District and certain assets are not, and are owned by the village. And I think that's really confusing for many of us.
Right. And that's why the collaboration, to Jill's point,
Right,
is
exactly.
essential. We're all on the same
And it's a
team.
Yeah, that's
Good
the
word.
right word.
Yeah.
Good word.
I guess,
Yeah, I did a plan commission training last night in another community, and we got to the list of government agencies that are involved in any given community, and we asked the question, which I'm sure you all know the answer to, is which state in the nation has more governmental entities than any other? So, there you go. Collaboration would be great. So let's pick up transportation. I think it's on the other side. If you did community facilities, on community facilities, it's right on the other side of that page. And don't worry, we'll get to community character. Clara has already figured out how to do it. So yeah, take 5 minutes to do this, and if you get done before that, raise your hand, and we'll press on. And
just a general question, Michael, on page 5 of the outline, at least that we have, that has preliminary districts, and the definition of open space area or green corridor. I don't want to diverge from what we're doing, but it was just a little lull. And we could always address it some other point.
Are we going to talk about the map tonight? tonight at the end, is that what you said?
Yeah, we'll talk about the map at the
Okay.
end. In terms of Green Corridor, that's just the name of that open space area. So the other open space area that we identified was the beach. Kind of hard to see. It's got the, kind of blends into the lake in the background.
Yeah, we could talk about it a little later. Thank you.
All right, has everybody gotten through transportation? Should we talk about those? So the part of the first one that jumps out at me is this notion of minimizing cut-through traffic. But what else did you all take from that that's most significant there, or maybe that's missing, or is this one truthful and complete?
I don't know. I think this is a tough one because I feel like traffic is changing. We've got electric scooters, electric vehicles.
That's really good.
We've got electric bikes. We have landscapers that are far too often present. And, I mean, I don't know how we can say we try to minimize the volume of traffic. How? So my big question is, how?
Yeah, I wrote that down, and I crossed it off and I wrote right size.
Right.
Because I'm not sure what the right size is. Some days I think there's too much traffic on my street. So it's a little bit vague and hard to comprehend.
But what do you think of the initial comment, which I think is great, is that to think of traffic as just cars or trucks anymore is a little
Absolutely.
bit narrow, isn't it?
Yep.
Right, like you said, e-bikes and scooters and, I wrote it down, and landscape vehicles and whatnot, so there's more than just cars and trucks that we're talking about.
And then you say you want to promote walkability, number 3,
Uh-huh.
and you're like, well, do we need to promote walkability or do we need to enhance that? And then you go back to 1, you're like, well, if that's all changing, is it promoting walkability when we have a lot more congestion of variety of traffic situations? So I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just have an observation.
You don't have to have answers tonight, so you're
Right.
you're in the right spot.
Okay.
No, that's a great point. Other thoughts on that or on that goal?
Well, just the first question, even when I went through these earlier, the first phrase kind of confused me, new residential areas into neighborhoods. And was the real goal of the statement to try and keep automobile, if a new area develops, we're trying to keep a huge influx of traffic from impinging upon an existing neighborhood? Is that what we really are after? I don't know if your team wrote this, or if Drew wrote it, or if someone
It's a
in the community
conglomeration.
wrote it.
But let's rewrite the idea. Where do you think it should be? Offer that.
I think my concern would be to limit automobile traffic from increasing into an existing neighborhood because of some development that would occur on a now vacant parcel. And I kind of had the word Stonebridge in my notes, like this sounds like it was a Stonebridge comment that was hotly debated 10 years ago.
And I believe this was one that was pulled almost exact from the 1996 comp plan, just as very much a discussion point of, is this what we want to continue with, or?
But the refinement that George is offering, and I ask everybody, I think is a pretty sound one in terms of limiting the impact of new developments onto existing neighborhoods. Did I paraphrase that correctly?
Well, vehicular impact, because I think we want walkable connections between all the neighborhoods. We want bikeable connections between all the neighborhoods. So I think we want to clarify what we're talking about when we talk about traffic.
But I can also see, again, we have the conflicts of we want open space, we want green space, we want trees. We're going to get landscapers and landscaping vehicles to increase, so a lot of the things that we want have unintended consequences, let's say, that I think we need to work in too. Or acknowledge, anyway.
Yeah. Good. What else? On this one, because as we get further, this one gets more interesting.
Well, I haven't formulated this thought completely. Maybe it'll work out if I
That's why it's a
say it
workshop.
out
Go ahead.
loud. But to tug on the idea of having electric scooters and bikes and all of that, you know, the more those increase, the more the likelihood of accidents with pedestrians increases
Yeah.
too. So that's something that I think we're going to have to more consciously address.
I don't know, Ann, if we address that via possible ordinances? Or the trails, the whatever entity oversees the trails, if they address that also? Because
Yeah.
it is a safety issue.
It's a
and
real
It's becoming
safety
a greater
issue.
and greater safety issue.
Yeah, there are,
It almost needs to be a separately listed goal, I think, because it is, in my view, it's, electric e-bikes and more powerful e-bikes are going to become more and more prevalent. I saw a teenager going down the bike path the other day adjacent to 176, and he had to be doing 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
He was going faster than the adjacent traffic on a path where people walk, you know. So it is,
it's real.
it's something that I think should be a goal. I don't know what the solution's going to be, but it's going to become a real problem everywhere.
We need speed bumps on the bike paths now.
I mean, that is a village ordinance, no motorized vehicles on the paths. It just has to be enforced.
Yeah,
And you have to define what a motorized vehicle is.
I don't
That's a
think that's clear
redefinition.
now in the law.
yeah.
Same with downtown district and kids on the on the scooters and the one-wheelers and stuff. You know, that has to be enforced and acknowledged.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. That's a village ordinance.
Well,
That's a village
transportation, but
problem.
I mean, it's a transportation issue.
That's not planning commission. Planning commission is the future. This is the current, this is the present now. We really need, the village needs to get on board with limiting this stuff on village public right away.
So it's a transportation goal, I would argue, that,
I suppose.
But-
But hopefully it'll be taken care of before this planning process is done.
That is also
Well,
true.
I think it's fair to look at this as the now and future thing. And if the village passes this ordinance before this gets adopted, all the better. But yeah,
And, and in number one, excuse me, you know, there's not that many new residential areas.
also true.
We're really talking about one or two. So I don't know, and that'll all get addressed once the zoning issues come up. Again, that's probably more current than future as well.
I'm going to this is all great, this is going really well, I'm just going to keep pushing us along so we keep going. So let's move on to number 2, which, again, the part of this that I circled had to do with varieties of access, but the different forms of mobility being integrated and coordinated. Again, a really good idea, but thoughts on building on that?
I'm not sure I really understand this question.
Okay.
I mean, we have our feet, we have vehicles, we have established that there are a number of electric vehicles, and of course, we have trains.
And it should be easy to get to and from all of those on all of those different forms of transportation, right? So it should be,
Right.
and again, a lot of these are things to preserve that already exist. It should be
Right.
easy and safe to walk to the train station
It should
from
be.
as much of town as you can.
Yeah.
It should be
Wouldn't-
easy and safe to ride your bike to the train station,
Right,
right? So that those changes in the form of mobility are easy and safe, is,
Right.
I guess, how I would summarize this.
Okay,
They
so-
generally are, but the question is, are there any that aren't or could be better?
right.
Or is this maybe something we don't even need to focus on?
Well, that's what I think I was envisioning, like, are we proposing some sort of inter-neighborhood shuttle system? I mean, I'm getting a little crazy, but that's, and are there places, you know, if you're in Knollwood and you want to use the train, that's, there's some travel issues there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and also I have heard that the light industry area has trouble securing employment. If they need, if employees, potential employees need to use the train, there's nothing really quickly and efficiently to get from the train station to the light industry area.
Good point.
You know, other communities have talked to PACE and things like that to, create some kind of systems, but again, at some point, there's a threshold that it makes sense, and below that, it doesn't make sense.
So again, the chimes are a reminder. How does promoting walkability fit into this? I think one of the things we just heard is if you're going to promote walkability, it's got to feel safe walking on these trails where kids are riding electric bikes at 40 miles an hour. Are there other aspects to promoting walkability?
I'm not going to answer your question, but my note to this was, if we're going to say promote walkability, we also should say promote bikeability.
Good.
Because in this community, biking is very important. I mean, we're at the intersection of two major countywide trails, which is a wonderful, or three, actually. And I think it needs to be in the transportation overreaching
Absolutely.
goals.
Great ad, great ad.
Yeah, maybe promote and enhance safe walkability and bikeability.
Good. And again, these are great discussions, and I'll move us a little faster, and if I skip past anything, you'll slow me down. But what about off-street parking, and promote off-street parking throughout the village? Is there a parking problem in town? Anywhere in town? Ever?
No.
There shouldn't be. I mean, you got the train station available from 10 a.m. on. People don't want to walk from there to
Thank you.
Central
True.
Village.
There's not a parking problem, there's a walking problem, is what we usually find in a lot of communities. And I will tell you too, that in a business district, having a parking problem is a sign of success, right? If the parking spaces are full, so are the restaurants. And if people have got to go park at the train station and walk half a block, those are all signs of success. Any other, and that's really the question I wanted to ask, is whether or not we had a parking problem in terms of off-street parking. I'm hearing no.
Another possible topic might be, Michael, feasibility of pedestrian tunnels or pedestrian walkways.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
There might be 2 or 3 or 4 potential areas for that.
This is definitely throwing stuff at the wall and seeing if it sticks. But, you know, when you walk into some places of business, and I've noticed it in some towns as a whole, that everybody has a little receptacle in the entryway for umbrellas. And
Promote umbrella.
some days we need umbrellas here. Might encourage people to get outside
If you're going to
and
encourage
just walk.
walking,
Yeah, exactly. That's not in a whole town plan, but just throwing it out to the audience.
sure. So anybody, anything to add either from the dais or from the room?
Yeah, good, thank you.
In terms of transportation?
If you want to, it just helps for the recording, yeah.
I have just a couple things for these points. The first one, when I read that, it struck me, and it was interesting, Michael, that you said that came from an old, like from 30 years ago, because I thought, oh, they want like, single entrances into housing developments, the old kind of controlled access in, which is a very, if you think about like Vernon Hills and Libertyville, some of their newer developments, that's how they were planned. That's kind of an old planning idea. The newer planning idea is that if the more connections and integration and networking you have of streets, actually it minimizes traffic issues because people have all sorts of options. They aren't funneled into a single area. And I remember back when Stonebridge was coming in front of the zoning board, there were neighbors that were arguing, oh, we only we'll let you have one, connecting point or something because of the fire engines, right? But, I thought that a better way to think about that would be that we network, we integrate new developments into the surrounding neighborhoods and make them part of the fabric of the village. And then, what's the next one? The transportation system, I think you all had good comments on that one. But, yeah, I just thought maybe we could support instead of provide. That was my only comment. On walkability, we need sidewalks in a lot of areas of the town. And I just heard from some residents today who are, I guess they're organizing a little petition to come in and ask the village for sidewalks in their neighborhood. And my personal passion is our tree canopy, and we have lost a lot of trees over the last 10 years, emerald ash borer. And I think that impacts walkability because, when your sidewalks no longer have as much shade, they're not as pleasant to walk. The final one, the off-street parking, I think you guys kind of destroyed it, but I would have knocked that one off too, because providing lots of off-street parking has been one of the big drivers of sprawl, make everybody provide an off-street parking lot for their building. And some on-street parking actually is okay, generally speaking.
Yeah, there's actually studies that show that adding parking adds driving, which adds traffic, which adds pollution, which adds other things, so. Sprawl. Let's press on again, and I'm doing this in the interest of time. If I'm
Sorry.
moving too fast, slow me down.
Not going to let you press on. No, I want to make
Oh,
another
sorry,
comment. I want to make another comment
Oh,
about.
please, no, absolutely.
Follow up to Ms. Collins' comment about the sidewalks. I would be distraught, and I hope a lot of people would be distraught if we had a general goal that implied that every street in the village should have sidewalks. Because there are streets like Lansdowne Lane that only have 6 very large homes. To put almost an acre of concrete on a very, very low volume street, to me, doesn't make sense. And I definitely am an advocate for sidewalks where there's higher density, but in the very low volume areas, the dead-end cul-de-sacs where there's only a handful of homes, the environmental damage that does, the number of trees that would be destroyed by constructing those sidewalks, because most of our neighborhoods are well-established. So I think however we state the sidewalk goal, somehow we need to, in my opinion, qualify it, and it needs to be in the appropriate
And that was the shorthand that I wrote down where it said extend,
neighborhoods.
fill in sidewalk gaps, said where appropriate, because I think you make a good point. Is that good with everybody? Are we on board?
Yeah, between trees and impervious surface that we're going to be adding to create more stormwater problems, I think we do have to really look at where it's
And
needed.
I don't think I heard, and I didn't hear that the answer was put sidewalks everywhere in front of every house in town, but it's good to clarify it. I agree with you.
We're giving Andrew clarification for his draft of the comprehensive plan.
And
And
his-
then the other big transportation question I have, which isn't on here, is our 2 major thoroughfares. To be silent on the concerns with traffic on 176, and then Sheridan Road, not so much Sheridan Road with speed, but I think that's going to shake out as a geographic concern. But right now, there's no, what are we calling these, general goals?
Fundamental goals.
Fundamental goals about our major thoroughfares.
Yeah.
Somehow, we need to figure out a way to have traffic flow, but then there's the statement that if you build them, they will come. So if we widen 176 to 4 lanes, which I think was in an earlier comment from your firm, not tonight, but somewhere I heard that since this process
I
started.
think we talked about
And if
3
we build-
lanes.
If we build a 4-lane cross-section on 176, then we're going to have to build a 4-lane cross-section on Green Bay Road. And where does it end? So somehow there needs to be a finely crafted statement that realizes that it's a concern to think about in the future, but
Yes.
when we do it, we need to be careful that we don't overbuild to move traffic and then destroy the connectivity of our village, because if we think it's hard getting across Green Bay now, it would be even worse if it was any of these roads, if they're 4-lane cross-sections, that it becomes a completely different challenge. So anyway, if Andrew could summarize that into 3 or 4 words, that would be great.
And just one other thing, if we are looking to the neighbor to the south, Lake Forest, and if the medical complex is growing and increasing, do we have any way to connect? You know, at this point, we don't. It's a dead end, and then down there's something, but I think that that's inevitable, that we are going to want a connection there and make it easy for people to walk to restaurants or to whatever we say is going to end up in there.
Might take advantage of that economic engine.
Right.
You know, another thought on transportation is the railroad crossing on 176. I know we talked about it a decade or more ago, whether or not you could put a quasi-tunnel or put a bridge. I know it cost a fortune.
I think we talked about that, and it's probably impossible to do the way it's set up, and the businesses and stuff. I think we've talked about that in the past.
Maybe in our 30 or 40-year plan.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice goal, but,
Well, if something's going to take 30 or 40 years, we better start now.
you know, what would be good, though, is,
And a lot of the, a lot of the value of the plan, I'm sorry to interrupt, a lot of the value of the plan is to plant these seeds so that somebody picks them up at some point if it's possible. And if it's not, it's an idea that's in there, but if it's possible, it's a place to start.
what's going to happen is all those power plants in Wisconsin and Waukegan will be closed, and you'll have a lot less train traffic. Won't be any coal cars.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
What's happening in Waukegan now, they're closing that plant.
All right, y'all having way too much fun. I'm going to move us along if it's okay.
Just getting started.
Do you want to
Let's-
tackle
no,
this
let's
one,
do-
next one?
Let's do that one.
Okay.
Which one?
Environmental sustainability. So do the same thing, and you're getting very efficient, and this one's short, so I'll give you just a few minutes to take some notes here, and then we'll talk about it. This is great feedback. Thank you all very much.
Oh, first one's the same sentence, right? Or am I-
Didn't we do this one?
Yeah, so you know what,
The first two.
one is on there, we had thought we might cross some boundaries here, but let's skip one then, we can talk about it if you want, but let's skip one and focus on the other ones.
I believe two.
One
is
and two
wind.
actually are both the same.
Yeah.
So we'll group those, if anybody's got anything to say about that in this context, that's great, but let's focus on number 3 if we could. And anything that might be missing, and actually, I already wrote down tree canopy on here, because that was mentioned, so let's focus on number 3 here in the interest of time, and what might be missing from this theme.
Number 3 on environment or housing?
Environment and sustainability, yeah. Let's focus on number 3 on your worksheets. You all also have already mentioned ravines in terms of what's significant for environment. So, like I said, let's focus here on what's missing from this list. It's kind of why we had to repeat here, is there wasn't a lot of depth yet. So we're looking for some help to add that. So in terms of environment and sustainability, I've written down, based on the conversation we've already had, tree canopy, ravines, lakefront, because they're different. Stormwater management, what else? Other things that need to be emphasized here on the sustainability and environment list?
Well, don't you think we should say
Y'all still
here?
writing, or you're not working ahead more, are you, George? I need you on these.
I'm still on number 3, the one we're talking on.
Okay.
I'm not as brave to throw odd thoughts out, but since I'm talking, I will now. I've always thought that the Crabtree Farm, the 200 acres of Crabtree Farms is a jewel. And I think most people in the village don't really think about it or appreciate it because they either go west or they go south. They don't go north on Sheridan Road, but and 80% of it, I think, or so is in conservation, but in my mind, to do whatever we can to preserve that area.
Good.
And I think it's part of the village's natural heritage.
Thoughts? That's a great one. That's a
You
great one.
think that
Thought-
much is conservancy?
Yeah,
80%?
it's pretty high, it's
No,
a
it's
pretty high
high,
amount.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Other
think that's
thoughts on
excellent.
Crabtree Farm?
Well, I'll add to that, I know in conversations with a couple of people who have ravine properties, and some of whom are working hard to build them back up and sustain them and get them into a better space. That's something that, they could be neighbor conversations, but wouldn't it be interesting if somehow those collectively could go into some sort of conservancy? Yeah, that's throwing it out there. And it's related to, I was just thinking about all the great work the History Museum has done, but this is part of our environment overall, our sociability, that we continue to celebrate our history and expand upon the stories of what our land was, what it became. There was a little bit of farming, there was, camp meetings. All of that enriches all of us to know these stories. And to know that this really was and still to the degree that it remains a very rich place, literally, environmentally. And that is something that we have, I think, tried to value, notwithstanding when the lake at the park was a dump. But that was then.
Okay, that's great. I put the emphasis on the word heritage there, right? Oh,
Yeah.
good, I like that. Everybody else agree with that? You like that one? What else about environment and sustainability strikes you that we should be focusing on other than what we've already talked about? Like I said, I'm going to kind of move us along in the interest of time, but audience? Absolutely. The chair said it's okay, not my meeting.
All right.
I always
How
defer to the
about,
chair.
how about emphasizing that as an overarching goal, that we preserve and enhance our local ecosystems, we emphasize planting native trees and other plants, that we become a dark sky community, and we expand our nature preserves. We're well endowed, but they can always grow, and that we look at interconnecting our hiking and biking paths.
Gotta talk slow and keep it okay. Interconnect, that's you.
Does she have to turn in her notes too?
Yeah, can we have your notes? I'm writing as fast as I can. Wow, this is great. Anything else to add to this? If not, we're gonna move to housing.
Just put Aaron Toll on your name sheet.
Okay, housing.
I don't think this is one. Andrew, is this one that we repeated any on? I don't think so.
There are repeats, just because certain goals.
None of these are repeats from what we've already done, right?
I don't think ones that we've done yet.
3 is.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
it is.
Okay. All right, so we're going to skip number 3, just trying to focus. We had thought maybe we would want to touch on the overlap, but we're going to, in the interest of time, we'll skip that one. But if you want to take any notes in relation to this, absolutely. But let's focus on 1, 2, and 4 here, please.
Just that they're currently looking at the opportunities. Not any sort of draft or anything like that yet.
A minute or so. And again, just as a reminder, the folks from Opticos are working on the question of how to address 1 and 2, if you will, or what are the opportunities to address 1 and 2. So this is something that there will certainly be much more of to come as the process goes on. But let's talk about 1 and 2 they're kind of mirrored a little, but let's start with number 1. And I'd be interested to hear what the group thinks about the need for diversity of housing and what that means. And if there is a need for diversity of housing, what does that mean in Lake Bluff?
Well, there is a need.
Okay.
It'll never happen, but there's a need. I think we've addressed it in this committee with ADUs.
Okay.
It's probably the easiest thing to accommodate in this village. There hasn't been any permits for ADUs since we talked about it and passed it. I just don't think we spend I don't think spending a lot of time on this, other than as a goal,
Okay.
is worthwhile.
Good. Thank you. Other thoughts?
If I were writing this statement, I would change that is tailored to the village to facilitate housing diversity without impacting the character of the village.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's a little more specific.
That's a little bit what number 2 gets to, but yeah. And I would suggest to you too, it's not necessarily so much a goal as a fundamental reality is the single-family nature of the village, right? We talked about this a little bit when we were doing the RPUD. So we've heard there's need for diversity, but there's difficulty in bringing it around. Is that, I don't know. Do we stipulate to that fact, I guess, is maybe the better question?
Well, as we said, we need to diversify, but yet we're sort of on question 2, you're sort of limiting the ability to enhance what we were talking about earlier about the industrial park, or, why do we have to limit the number of institutions? So you're sort of dictating, putting us in sort of a narrow scope, and I think that's, and I almost felt like number 1 and 2 were contradicting one another.
Yeah, I had that sense too.
So perhaps that we shouldn't think of it that way if we're trying to enhance change.
I concur completely. I don't like the word primarily. That is true technically right now, but I don't think we should be directing that necessarily. And I don't like the word limited. And I think that we should entertain options, and if it can size into the village to help build us together, to add cohesion, we should remain open to more broad ideas.
Okay, great.
We simply may not have thought far enough or seen enough options to consider.
And as Ms. Collins said in her introductory comments, we're really not going to make an impact numerically if we're only worried about Block 3,
Right.
if we're only worried about a little portion of the R5 district that can possibly be enhanced somewhat density-wise. We're going to have to look to opportunities, long-term opportunities, like a possible transition of the L1 area.
Agree.
And then
For the
also.
broader thinking.
Also, east of the water treatment plant, it's a big property that
Jawa?
could. Yeah, east of
Yeah, by Jawa.
But east of that, that big property, that certainly can be developed in a lot of different ways and not impact the rest of the village.
So to the extent there are undeveloped properties, or there are potential for new developments, that we should be open to a variety of housing types or sizes as part of that.
Yes.
Okay.
And appropriate, I think parking and all those things, maybe that's getting into the weeds, but all of those things that are changing too. And I think that in our R5s, we've had real limitations because of parking. The current rules about parking, it's impossible to do, some of the multifamily, let's say, there, because we don't have enough parking once you build the facility. But those rules maybe are just archaic at this point, or becoming archaic.
Especially when you have electric bicycles.
Scooter.
Put it underground.
How do you define institutions, Michael?
That's a really good question. I think institution is anything that's not, well, that's not part of the rest of that list, right? So institutions become public facilities, become governmental facilities, they become private cultural organizations, schools and churches are definitely high on that list. And again, you mentioned you weren't thrilled with the word limited, and maybe that's part of the answer here is, let's not necessarily focus on limiting the institutions, let's limit the issues that we're concerned about, is what I've heard from the group.
Right.
Right, institutions generally are the type of facilities that provide public service.
And sense of community, right?
Public benefits,
Yeah.
so we shouldn't
Right.
be implying that we want to limit them.
Right.
I like that. Good. Anything else on housing? We've got number 4 at the bottom here that talks about, preserving the historic element and the unique residential character, and certainly the founding of the village is something that's reflected in its housing. What's the value of that and the importance of that as we sit here today? Does that still matter?
Well, I think it's very important. It's, it
I
is
knew
what
the
Lake
answer, I
Bluff
just wanted to
is.
hear it.
It is what Lake Bluff is. It's an historic village.
I like that. It's
And that's
what
why we
like-
don't want change, well, to a certain extent.
Well, we can support the historical and allow it to be livable. We could allow to maintain a facade on a building and redevelop the interior. you know.
Yeah, and maybe one word to throw into that list is encourage, promote, maintain, encourage, and enhance. I know the HPC has done some incentives of various sorts.
I've never lived in one, but I understand there's certain challenges to living in a house that's 100-plus years old.
Just about there.
All right, I don't want to cut short, but I want to keep us moving along too. Anything else about housing here or here? Oh, 2 people, come on up.
My comment's just real short. Somehow, I think you all, like I did, hated that number 2 up there, kind of the way it didn't really capture the quality of our town. And I like number 4 as a lead-in more, but could we add a reference to scale? Because to me, that's, like, we talk about character, but scale is going to be kind of the determining element, you know, that needs to be preserved.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk. My name's Tim Penich, for anyone who doesn't know me. I agree with what Ms. Collins said about scale, and I think that's important when looking at housing diversity. And I think it's important to look at housing diversity throughout the village, and I don't think it should just be looked at in undeveloped areas. I think there are opportunities within developed areas within the village to add diverse housing types at an appropriate scale. And I think this is big picture, probably not realistic, but I think it'd be good for the village to look at a form-based code to help encourage different housing types. And while I commend you for allowing ADUs, I think the restrictions on those might be a little too tight. I don't know if that's the reasoning for why you haven't received any requests for that, but I think that could be looked at. And Ms. Fisher mentioned parking with multifamily homes and being an issue, and this also goes with transportation issues, but I know this has been done to an extent in the CBD, but parking minimums I think should be looked at and potentially be removed. When you look at Target, this is a little off topic, but half of that parking isn't used. And moving on to number 2, I agree, I was uncomfortable with the word limited, and I thought that it conflicted with the goal of number 1. And then just finally on number 4, I think it's important to look at housing that was allowed in the village. We should look at why should it be allowed again. Looking at the cottages, smaller lot sizes, there's 2 flats and duplexes scattered through East Lake Bluff that you don't necessarily realize are 2 flats or duplexes. So just some ideas to get at housing diversity. I know my opinion may be a minority, but I just wanted to share it. So thank you for the opportunity.
And I would just add to that, to stay tuned, if you will, because a lot of what Opticos talks about in terms of that missing middle housing has got to do with form-based codes. That's a lot of what their design thinking is. And the idea of, it's called gentle density, which is kind of a hysterical term, but whatever, is the idea that you've got, either 2-unit dwellings or 3s or 4 that look basically like a single-family home. Right? So the thing that you're talking about is very much along the lines of what Opticos is going to be looking at for the village, so. Cool. All right, got a couple more in you, team? You're really good at this. Can we go? Oh, thank you. So let's go back to economic development, and we'll do community character last. And again, some of these are historic, so some of the points might look a little historic. But let's think in terms of these topics and spend just a couple of minutes writing down your thoughts, and then we'll discuss them. again, not to rush you all, but the conversations have been great. I want to get back to it. So if we can talk about community character and start from number 1, which talks about consumer needs and a broader tax base, which it kind of puts together here. They're not necessarily the same thing, but tax base is more of a, well, tax base issue, and consumer needs is more about, can you get what you need in town? And it carries through to number 2 as well, but the fact that there are 2 really significant and different business districts in town is really an interesting part of the village. I mean, the downtown couldn't be any more different from where Target is and vice versa, and so there's this option for different kinds of needs being met. But if we look at those together in terms of meeting those needs and tax base, what are your thoughts about these first couple in terms of economic development?
Should L1 be incorporated into both 1 and 2?
Should what, I'm sorry?
Should L1 be incorporated into both 1 and 2?
I'm asking the questions here. What do you think?
I certainly would consider it,
Okay.
just to make sure we don't forget about it.
Well, you can do that in one, most of the business district, CBD and L1, to meet
Yeah.
consumer needs. Just combine, just add it to number 1. I also think you really have 2 different communities, the Waukegan Road corridor and the downtown. And downtown is a bar and restaurant haven, but it's a difficult place for people to, it's not difficult to walk to. There's no basic needs met in the downtown area. We don't have Marv's Market or other local grocery stores where people can just walk. And that goes back to providing alternate housing for people who maybe don't have cars or have difficulty getting around. And maybe we should encourage a limited grocery store in the downtown area rather than drink and food.
I forget who it was. Somebody at one of the stakeholder interviews we did said that there are 3 retailers in downtown. To your point, that it's almost entirely dining.
It's all
Is that-
dining
And service.
and a dry cleaners.
So services more than you, yeah, okay. Good point, great. Other thoughts about economic development in terms of these business districts?
Well, I think maybe promoting the fact that, and I think, Clara, I'm not sure what the current amount is, but for a long, long time, we've been the second lowest tax rate in Lake County. And that may have jumped in that last changes and stuff, but I think people perceive that we're a higher, yes, we're in the 6th highest county, probably in the country, I think, but we are still low relative to here. So, and I don't think we get that message out to businesses and such. And maybe that, coupled with what the needs are, might encourage some more people to come to either area.
I agree.
We're
I don't
we're
think
low-
we can,
I'm sorry, we're low? You're
Second-
saying in tax rate overall?
We've been the second lowest for years, after Lake Forest, believe it or not. Lake Forest had the lowest tax rate. We had the second lowest for all of Lake County. for
Tax
all-
rate,
Are we talking
Rate,
about
right, tax
sale-
rate.
Are we talking about sales or property?
yeah.
Property tax rate, yeah, which impacts rents and,
Right.
right.
Okay. It's, yeah, we have to be very careful with those statements.
we have to use the
because
right words, right, for sure.
If, just because the rate's low doesn't mean the taxes are low, because our land values are astronomical compared to many other communities.
Right, but
So
then,
so it had, I think we're talking about bottom line taxes, not,
right, but it impacts it dramatically, because if you look
Oh,
at the
that's what I'm-
taxes
that's
of
what I'm
Gray's
saying.
Lake for commercial or something, they're incredibly high, because their tax rate is high, so.
yeah, I'm just saying
Yes.
it needs to be worded very
Yeah.
Right, and,
carefully.
we could certainly do research to figure out the best kind of messaging, but I think people just assume that we're out of sight, and that's not always the case. So, anyway, just a thought.
Good point.
Right, it's making sure that we're comparing apples to apples, which is very important.
Right.
Agreed. Other thoughts about economic development generally in these two districts in particular?
Well, we do have this forlorn, I don't know what you even call it, the small industrial business district that is north of 176 and east of Highway 41 that is absolutely begging for redevelopment.
Right.
It is, and somehow the comp plan needs to identify that as a very primary goal of the village. It's,
I think we
I
need
don't even want to say anything publicly about it.
I think we need a
But
soccer
it
field.
it needs improvement. You
I
know?
think we need a soccer field there.
What, anything would be better, but
Oh, but it's amplified by the fact that it's the gateway to the village. This is how you get into town.
Again,
Right.
exactly.
Is that relevant to your
Midtown.
point?
yes, although right there at the access way, it's actually not the village,
It's
but that's a
northbound.
different.
That's
Yeah,
how
no, I
you-
hear you.
But just to the north there, we have, anyway, there is a village business park that absolutely needs to be redeveloped and should
Okay.
be a primary goal.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying
So-
to get you to say something you don't want to, but I just wanted to make sure I understand.
And I do think that may partially get at number 3, but not up completely.
Right.
So let's go to number 3. Are there areas to annex? Are there areas to, so annexation is about control and potential to add economic development for businesses. So are annexing some of these areas that we're talking about, is that an idea that has merit for the village?
I think I would add a couple qualifiers, like
Okay.
if appropriate after annexations, and then after vitality and the community's values and character.
Good.
I don't think we necessarily would want to pursue annexation just for the purpose of land grab.
Agreed.
Right, agree.
Great, and that's a great distinction. Was that one that the group shares?
Yes.
Very good, well said, thank you. Anything else on these economic development points?
Same preservation clause on 4.
I would just add parenthetically, you're making great points, because economic development is great because you can define it any way you want. But I often see planning, and what you all do in particular as a PCZBA, is finding that balance between economic development, which is just more tax base, which is the opposite of what you said, which is just grab it. You know, years ago in Illinois, you could, they called it strip annexation. You ever heard about this? And there would be communities that would annex the road through an unincorporated area to grab a small shopping center to get the sales tax. Right? And so a lot of those areas have filled in, but years ago, I remember looking at a lot of zoning maps that had these long strips where the road was annexed. It's actually why O'Hare is in Chicago, if you think about it, right? If you think about that map. But the idea of just grabbing, just to grab, just to have it, is what I'm hearing is the exact opposite of what you all just said. Is that a fair summary? Okay, good, well said. Okay, again, in the interest of time, oh, please.
Oh, yeah, just for 1 and 2.
Absolutely.
We talk about local residents, or it seems like we talk about local residents. We also want to appeal to the broader community, you know, like Forest and the surrounding
Okay.
areas.
I like that. Okay, again, I'm not trying to cut it off, I just want to keep us going before we hit the witching hour, which I think we already did, but that's okay, we'll keep going. Anything else but economic development?
I have no idea where this fits in as a topic, but I think we have to be very concerned about what happens to our train station, because it's unsettled. I mean, it's up for sale, I guess.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Well, the train
Train station.
station
Oh, train
has been
station.
closed, and Union Pacific wants to offload all of those properties. You,
I did not
village
even know
officials
that.
may know more about this. But anyway, I know a lot of communities have actually purchased their train stations, and ours is just so important for the character of our town. So I think we should figure out something to
That
plan
absolutely
for
has to
that.
be in the community character and transportation areas. I
Okay.
completely agree. To lose the train station would be horrible. Not to mention the brewery would have to close because of all the people that wait for their train at the brewery. True.
Anything else?
No, that's an excellent point. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that was.
Yeah.
So let's move on to our orphan child community character. Take whichever one you haven't written on yet, which may actually say community character at the
I
top
think
of
we've
it.
covered most of those questions.
And, yeah, if you need an extra one, but take whichever one you haven't written on yet, and have the community character one, and I have crossed off all the questions, and we're gonna talk about 2, 3, and 4 here. So make yourself use whatever 2, 3, and 4 you have left to comment on this 2, 3, and 4 here.
No, the community character? No, because I think most of these questions I thought we worked through most of
I think
these.
just the first one.
Second one we did,
I think there was a
did.
similar one.
maintain quality. I think we did all
Kind of
four.
redundant.
While everybody's thinking, can you think about two things at the same time? I'm sitting here in shock that our train station is,
Yeah. For sale?
because they don't use the train these days, that is for sale. Has anyone ever heard the village board talk about this in public? Anybody on our board? Ever?
Anybody?
Okay. We need to get the village board talking about this in public. Because they must
They own
know.
a parking lot too, don't they? That train station?
Really a question for Drew, I think. I just don't know enough, but I've read how other communities have bought train stations to protect us. And I don't think we have a plan yet to make sure that.
You have a new project. Save the train
This is what
station.
happens when you come to meetings and suggest things. You knew this was gonna happen.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you.
So anyway, in terms of keeping us focused a little bit on community character, to think through this idea of the intrinsic character and charm of placemaking. That's kind of a mouthful of jargon, but it's an interesting notion. I'd be interested to hear what you think about. And then in terms of high standards of appearance, that third one's also very interesting. And then that fourth one also is a mouthful of jargon, but it's already stuff you've been doing. I mean, part of this is the ADUs that were mentioned and the RPD that we revised together. So that's kind of what four is talking about. But in general, just to keep us going and not to cut you off as you write, but thoughts about community character, sort of writ large, high level, as it talks about the character and charm of the community. Heard a lot about this as we did the stakeholder meetings, about just the character of the community being so important.
I think that concept, community character and intrinsic stuff, really prevents us from going outside the box on development. Because people don't want change, and I don't blame them. We love our community. So thinking in terms of, a single-family home with 4 homes in it, maybe it would work because it doesn't change the character of the neighborhood. I said that to my wife, and she said, well, I don't want 4 families living next to me. It's the same with, temporary renters type of thing. So no matter what we decide or what we want to do, there's always going to be blowback.
But that's a great take on community character as a double-edged sword,
Absolutely.
right? And that it's something that is important to preserve, but it's also something that limits growth and change and perhaps enhancement in other areas.
You can put 4 cars in their driveway, That's going to impact the neighbors. We've talked about this as long as I've been on these boards, and there's never a really good solution that people will buy into. That's just the reality that I see.
And again, thinking on this has come a long way. And again, I don't mean to put so much on Jennifer and Opticos, but that's really where they are at the cutting edge of thinking this way in terms of how do you change without it being a pain point. And so we'll be talking more about that, but I don't know if you had it in mind as a double-edged sword, but that's the way I heard it.
Yeah, it is. And, I think duplexes may work. Anything more than that, I think you'll get a lot of blowback from the communities on the east side, and the west side as well.
Well, and I wonder if maybe a key to that statement isn't placemaking. I mean, placemaking, I take as something that is evolving and growing and adapting, hopefully.
What do you mean by placemaking?
I'm not really sure.
Is that up there?
I think we need to define placemaking.
I haven't seen it. Number 2. Good placemaking.
But, like I've spoke about emphasizing our community history. I don't want to do that to the point where we are saying, no, you cannot change without the great blessings of the elders or something. I mean,
The great oracle,
You're one of the elders.
go visit the oracle and ask if a change is acceptable to the community.
exactly.
Exactly.
It's pretty okay, sometimes.
Thanks.
First of all, I would tell you that
Thanks for that.
placemaking is something that I generally call quality of place, which is how much do you like being in. Downtown is the answer to what is placemaking? The downtown, right? So, but I prefer the phrase quality of place as kind of like quality of life, but quality of place. Like, how much do you like being there? How much do you want to go there? If somebody said, hey, do you want to go downtown? Is your thought, yeah, you know what, that'd be great, as opposed to, ugh, again, right? And so how attractive is something to you as residents is what I think of as placemaking, that you've created a place that people are just always ready to go to.
Right.
And I think downtown has touched a lot of those bases.
Right. So that speaks to the human scale. It speaks to volunteers. It speaks to people who are willing to jump in and say, hey, let's get together, let's meet up. And those characteristics are something that seem to run through the village very well. So I think people moving here often are coming here if they've heard about it beforehand because they know that that is a part of the character.
So let me test that, because we
Yeah.
heard some of that from the stakeholders, and that's a really interesting point, is that the physical form of the village, the fact that you can walk to downtown from a lot of it, the fact that it's such an inviting place, that it's a quality of place, that creates some of the volunteerism, that creates some of the attachment to the community, and then it's sort of a cycle that builds on itself, right? You've got a nice place that people want to be part of. Is that, am I making that up, or is that what you were saying, and is that
Yes.
what you all think?
Oh, absolutely.
That's a great observation, thanks.
But I don't think we need to, there was a word promote that's throughout these pages. And I don't know if we need so much to promote walking or promote the character. Promote is, I think if we enhance and we build on something that is really good and we continue to think out of the box to enhance, we don't need to have more billboards and signage to say where we are. And we enhance our treescape and we build our heritage tree program. There's a lot that we can do in changing our team here and building our, ordinances, things that could enhance, because I worry about that word promote, that's all.
It's very prescriptive. Yeah.
I'm hearing a really interesting kind of balancing act here between the importance of this character that is Lake Bluff, and then it not be the limiting reagent to doing other things that might otherwise benefit the community, that it's not, we're not trying to change things dramatically, but to the extent that even modest changes like a duplex, might be something that is otherwise a good idea if properly designed in the appropriate place. But let's not let this other aspect of community character just dismiss that out of hand. And again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I'm extrapolating from what I've heard and would want to know if I'm getting close to what you're all feeling.
I think so.
And I think enhancing our strengths or building on our strengths, like our bikeability and stuff, that brings in more people who like the same thing and stuff. I've heard that, well, we know that there's groups that come on Thursday nights or whatever the nights are and stuff. And, that helps, I think, broaden our sense of community without having to recreate a wheel or promote something. It's organic, kind of. It just, but as long as we're building on the strengths that have been identified. And they may bring new ideas and new opportunities and things.
Yeah, new people bring new ideas has anybody been to Houston? I know this is completely irrelevant. I was in Houston once for like 36 hours for a meeting, and I didn't want to go because it's Houston. Why would you go to Houston? And I was having dinner with some folks from Houston, and like, you people, those of us who aren't from Houston, have the town all wrong. They talk about how the fact that nobody's from here is actually the best thing about Houston, because everybody is welcoming, right? And it's always open to new ideas, right? And there's always trying new things. And so this idea that the thing that you think is maybe not the great thing is the great thing, and the thing that you think is the great thing is don't let it hold us back from being a newer thing, is what I hear you all talking about. It's really.
But they don't have any zoning laws.
They.
Makes it much easier to do whatever you want to do.
They have a full.
Houston and Texas?
They have, what's that? They have enough regulations and covenants that they might as well have zoning. This is, so. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of pick at that a little bit because it's an aspect of character I've not really heard people talk about a lot, and I just want to make sure that we've got it right as we go forward.
Well, it'd be interesting to see how you state it, because I think the character of the village is of primary importance. And yes, I understand the comment that you shouldn't not let anything happen because you're afraid it's going to affect the character. But on the other hand, a statement in the code that implies that duplexes are just fine in any block where a developer can buy a single-family home and put a duplex if anyone thinks a duplex doesn't cause the loss of trees, cause the increase in traffic, more stormwater, then they're smoking. And it's just a reality. Everybody wants a car, but for the most part. And if you build duplexes, the people that move into duplexes, there might be an argument that, they live close to downtown, they're not going to want a car, so we don't need to require any parking spaces for these. I mean, I go all the way back to when the sanctuary was being debated, even though it wasn't in the village, and the planning people came to the village, and their first estimate was that there were only going to be 3 children for the entire sanctuary development, that it was going to be completely occupied by young professionals with no children. That is an absolute fact, how it was presented. And so these broad statements that no impact, I just don't, I don't buy into that.
Well, I think the scenario that you're describing goes beyond the sense of balance that the plan needs to strike. I think it's a great scenario to think through in terms of, all right, let's expand the example to know where we don't want to be. But, I've heard the phrases where appropriate and in keeping with the character. And again, that's the question that the work that Opticos is doing is going to challenge, right? Is that how do you do, if you're going to say duplexes are okay, and I don't think I heard you say that, yeah, just put a duplex anywhere, that's fine, or do it, but how could it be done in a way that's acceptable? And you mentioned form-based codes is one way to do that, so.
What does that mean?
Form-based codes? Oh, Lord. So.
Briefly,
Zoning is based primarily on use, right? And it talks about how tall how far setback from the street, how far setback side yards, right? Form-based codes is not so much about the use, but it's about the form, it's about the structure itself, right? And a lot of it is about design elements, right? So a form-based code will tell you that it's not as concerned with what goes on in the building as it is about where the parking is located, or the fact that there are architectural details on the building, or that the building emphasizes one front door instead of two, for instance, that sort of thing. So it's zoning that really adds design and scale to it focuses more on design and scale than it does use. There, I knew I could get around to the short answer if I talked long enough. And the reason I laugh is because a form-based code is typically a lot longer, because it's got it takes a lot to explain that in a code.
I get the idea.
I can keep going.
No, all right.
This has been wonderful, and you all are great at this, and thank you all for your help. Anything else about community character that we should note or take note of before we close this part and talk about the map? Let's put the map up real quick, and we'll tell you, I'll say again what we were thinking of doing with it, and interested to hear your thoughts on that. And if you have thoughts on the map, or if you want to draw on it and send notes about that to Clara, we're going to refine it with staff. But the idea is that in the past, more detailed goals and objectives in the village's planning have been based around these geographic areas. Some of them are thematic, like we talked about tonight, right? We cut it a different way. We cut about it in terms of economic development and community character and that sort of stuff. But we're also going to be looking at translating these notions into these different geographies. And the idea is not to be separating these areas or saying this can only happen here, this can only happen there, but it's to acknowledge the differences in them. So what we hoped to do was to be able to identify, is for this map to be identifying areas that are cohesive in their character and livability. So that said, either share now or share later, but that's what we had in mind. And if you think that these boundaries need to be refined or tweaked, let us know.
I have a problem with that definition or the reference to green corridor.
Okay.
As it applies to the golf course and the park district facilities over there. It just seems to me that it ought to be identified as such, golf course, park district.
Oh, so
whatever.
acknowledging its component parts.
Right.
Okay.
Really. On the south side of 176, that is a green corridor that's, but that's what my preference would be.
Yeah, I had the same markup, Gary, on mine, that there's a distinct difference between the open spaces not owned by the park district and the active parks that we have with developed recreational uses. And the green area, overflows the elementary school completely, and there's other, it's
more
it
nuanced
encompasses
than
the
the
water
map show.
plan, it swallows up Mariani, anyway, it's, obviously refinement needs to be made to
I hear you
to
saying
the
it's
map,
more
and
nuanced than this map shows.
so I think, to me, our parks need to be in a separate, the park district facilities need to be in my view, in a separate category from open space. I personally would separate out Crabtree Farms from Shore Acres. I just think they're two completely different, not completely different, but in terms of density, as I mentioned earlier, there's 80% of Shore Acres, if not more, is it's a farm for the most part. There are with houses, as opposed to Shore Acres, which is all essentially 1.5 or individual single-family homes. So to me, there's a difference. So when you're developing the recommendations for each area, I think there is a basic difference there. So I don't know that if and then the whole Canals Auto Park area and if that needs to be separate from the business park. I don't know, maybe not, but
Probably not. It's commercial.
Right.
And is there any sense in having the green space showing that's east of Sheridan? You know, that to me, I'm hearing more and more people say, is that just a block? You know, does that block people from getting from East Lake Bluff to across the way or something? Could that be developable? So I don't know whether highlighting just that exists as green space, that sort of strip of park.
If you have any other thoughts about it, wake up screaming about it in the middle of the night, just pick up the phone and call Clara. No, just kidding, shoot her an email, for goodness sakes. But thank you, that's real useful. And again, we're not trying to create uniqueness or separate these areas, but we're just trying to look for a structure to use in the plan. So this is very helpful, thank you.
And the same, I mean, just to, and you obviously know it because the black boundaries are there, but that triangle that connects the sanctuary with the villages, you know, it's completely different. I mean, the sanctuary is totally built out. It's a newer
Right.
area. The goals for that area are going to be completely different than the triangle parcel. Just, and I think the 10-acre piece, that's
Yeah.
should possibly be, I mean, that's a parcel that's going to be dealt with one way or another here in the next 20 years, I would think.
Well, that's helpful. As we think of how to structure the next step in goals and objectives, that's very helpful in terms of us thinking geographically, so thank you. And again, if you have other thoughts, just shoot an email and we'll keep going with this and bring this back to you when we bring back the next level of goals and objectives. I would just say thank you. This was really, I'm sorry. Oh, I was just going to say thank you. That's what we had and that's what we needed, and you were all really good at this. If you want to leave us your notes, we'll add those to our collective wisdom from the discussion. But other than that, just thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the floor to you, sir.
Well, no, thank you very much, Michael and Andrew. Excellent presentation, excellent dialogue, and also thanks to Mickey for her presentation, because it reinforces the L1 issue or potential issue. So, very, very productive evening.
Too late? Okay.
All right.
Right.
Agenda item number 5, review of the proposed 2024 meeting dates.
Still the third Wednesday of every month, right?
Guess the most critical one is probably December.
December 18th is the one that is proposed.
Always change it when we get closer.
Yeah. I mean, that's big.
Who knows?
Yeah, but I believe it's the third Wednesday of each month with no exceptions
Okay.
for this.
Great. Staff report, agenda item number 6.
So the only thing that I just wanted to let you guys know, I know during this discussion, we talked about some of the historic, I know Deb brought up some of the incentives that have been offered by the PCZBA and also the HPC recently. And I just want to let you guys know that at yesterday's HPC meeting, 2 landmark nominations were presented, and the HPC has decided to give a favorable recommendation for the village board to landmark those, and it's 331 East Witchwood and 125 East Center. Really interesting presentations if you guys wanted to take a look at those. A recording should be on the website shortly.
Anything for next month?
There is a possible public hearing for some residential variations.
Get back to business.
All right, we covered Commissioners' report, agenda item number 7. Agenda item number 8, adjournment, motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nobody argues that.
We all moved and we all seconded.
Great.
Unanimous.
Well, continue.